Good morning, Sense of Things, and welcome to the new year. Ron and I have been piling up a lot of great information over the last couple weeks, but we also took a couple weeks off just to relax a little bit and enjoy family, friends, and time off a little bit from work
Cookies.
and cookies.
Cookies. Lots of
Cookies. The cookies
7
are
pounds
good.
worth.
So on today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about it. We're filming this show on the day of President Carter's funeral. So I've got a few facts that you may not have heard about him or you may not know about him. And I'm going to cover some economics on this show. So stay tuned. We'll be right back on in just a minute. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Sense of Things. Ron and I are here. Ron, Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy New Year to you too. I got to tell you, I know we were just joking about the cookies. I'm not kidding. I gained 7 pounds in December.
No way, man.
I didn't go to the gym as much or whatever. I'm not going to say I sat around on the rear as much, but holy crap, man. I don't know what was in those cookies, whether it was just pure lard or what, but holy mackerel.
The funny thing is, I typically I don't really eat a lot during the holiday. Yeah, there's that Thanksgiving Day and then Christmas Day where you have a big meal or whatever. But I'm just not a sweets fan, so I don't eat a lot of sweets. So this time of the year is so funny. My wife and I ended up for Christmas. It's like each of us, oh, we need to get stocking stuffers, and so we end up buying each other like these big things of chocolate and all that. I'm like, literally, we're going to live off of this for the next year, to the point where the chocolate just gets like white and yucky because we just don't eat that much. We might eat a piece of chocolate per day and that's it.
If I had to add it up, and it's a pure guess, I probably received 5 to 7 pounds of chocolate, over 10 pounds of cookies and give. And I shared, I gave away. Hey, maybe
You got to keep a
that
few.
one looks good.
Let me try that one. Yeah. One little bit here and there.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. This year, and I appreciate it because I love to give stuff to clients and whatever, but the amount of candy or chocolate and cookies was in abundance, to say the least.
That is awesome. That tells you you're loved, man. That's you've
And
done
my
a good
clothes have
job.
told me that it was in abundance too.
Yeah, that's great. We say goodbye to President Carter. When I think back, both of us grew up in that time when he was president, and the presidency was not exactly I will say stellar. He was dealt a bad deck to begin with, but he didn't do much with it. But to quote F. Scott Fitzgerald, we don't get a second act in most cases, but I think he really got a hell of a second act.
I agree.
He's one of the few presidents I've ever seen that just whatever he did afterwards was so much more than he ever did as a president. So I wanted to share today just some facts, 5 quick facts that I got from the Carter Center and the Library of Congress of things that I didn't really know, or I knew but didn't know very much of. So here are 5 top facts that you may or may not know about President Carter. So he was born October 1st, 2024, Plains, Georgia. He was the first person in his father's side of the family to graduate from high school. I saw an interview with him because they've been playing a lot of that on the news. At 4 years old, he knew he wanted to go to the Naval Academy. That was his only dream goal. And he entered Annapolis during World War II, graduated in the class of 1946. So he didn't serve in World War II. However, he was one of the first nuclear engineers in the nuclear Navy, which was pretty cool.
It's interesting. I thought there might have been another one. I know FDR was in charge of the Navy before he became president, but I wonder how many West Point graduates, because I think the Army's been around longer than the Navy. I don't know about that, but it's kind of curious to know that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. You have Ike.
Oh, that's true.
Eisenhower. Yeah, it's interesting. There's just not a whole lot of generals or naval officers or whatever. We would have had McCain one. He would have been the second Naval Academy graduate.
True.
He gave up the thing he'd always wanted to be was a military officer. He had planned to serve his time as a naval officer, and he wanted to retire in Hawaii. That was his goal, that he and Rosalind, but he ended up having to give up his military career after his father died and their peanut farm was failing. And so he still didn't want to not serve something. And so he ended up, as a parent, he became part of the local school board, which launched his career, eventually becoming a state senator, governor, and then, of course, president. After his presidency, he founded the Carter Center, which played an active role in human rights and disease prevention issues globally. And this was the thing that was the surprise to me, because I thought he had actually founded Habitat for Humanity. He didn't. He just publicized it. And he and Rosalind were involved in it for so long. For me, not really understanding the beginnings and knowing much about Habitat for Humanity, he's so identified with it that it's just amazing that I thought he
I
was
think there's video of him out there hammering nails
yep,
and 2x4s and whatever.
up until I think when he was in his 90s. He was like
I believe
95,
so, yeah.
96, and he was still out there, every year involved in those projects and stuff like that, up until the point where I think when he turned 97, that's when he went into hospice and he just couldn't be out there anymore. This was a surprise to me. Yeah, you said you knew this, but
Yeah.
I always thought he had received his Nobel Prize early on after all the Camp David Peace Accords and all that. But he actually received his Nobel Prize in 2002. And it wasn't just for the peace accords, but it was for decades of him just always being out
Long
there.
overdue.
Yeah, and it was interesting because as you start to look at a lot of what he did afterwards, he was actually, for a lot of presidents, that one guy they could parachute into certain areas, who wasn't necessarily part of the government, and he would go in there and negotiate things in a lot of cases. So just really interesting career afterwards. And I think the two things that I knew, but it was just nice. He and Rosalind were married for 77 years. The love of his life, first love of his life, and 100 years old, oldest president ever.
Actually, correct me if I'm wrong. I know 25 years of marriage is silver, 50
Yep.
years is golden. My parents had that. Is 75 diamond? What do they call 75? If you
I
make it to 75.
Yeah, it's so few people make it that far. I don't know. I mean, I would assume it's like diamond or something like that.
I gotta
Well,
look
okay,
that up.
so actually it is, because remember, I was actually over in London for Queen Elizabeth's Diamond Jubilee, which was 75 years.
Okay, there you go. I was a
Yeah.
I think I had heard that, but it was a guess.
Yeah, great guess. So, a couple things this week. Me being the economic geek, I always try and look at what's coming up. So, this is off of briefing.com. A couple things really, I think that are of high importance. We've got some additional job claims. They've actually gone down this week, continuing claims floating around where they've been. So, that's really the only thing that's of high importance today. Tomorrow's a big day because we get
Yep.
non-farm payrolls, private payrolls, average hourly earnings, all those things that are related around that, which are typically high impacts. And you're looking at, like, non-farm payrolls was 227 or 227,000 prior to this month. So that it would be last month's report, which was November. Estimates are that's going to drop off pretty significantly tomorrow. And who knows where it can go, because it's been so inaccurate this year, or in this last year. It's been amazing. Average hourly earnings should be in line. Unemployment rate staying in line, we think. Average work week staying in line. So not a lot of changes. And if any of those move, could really cause the markets to move a little bit, because I think the biggest thing I'm hearing is everybody's waiting and seeing what the Fed's going to do. And they basically said, we're we're in wait and see mode. What are your thoughts, Ron?
Uh, I gotta tell you, if you wanna go back to December of 2023, and I know we talked about this in prior podcasts, they were talking about possibly, what, 4 to 6 cuts last year, we only had 3. And
Yeah.
it ended up that was one of the few things I nailed on the head, where I
Yeah.
said there'd be 2, possibly 3. This year, now they're expecting 1 to 2,
Yeah.
possibly 3. And I know it's a little bit of a right turn, but I'll take a right and come back. So everybody has upped their price targets this year. We did that on our last podcast. A lot of
Mhm.
people have taken recession off the table. So I have heard 2 people, one in person yesterday from First Trust, their top 2 economists, Bob Westbury,
Mm.
I'm sorry, Brian Westbury and
Yeah.
Bob Stein.
Yep.
And they are both calling for a recession this year.
Interesting.
And typically I've always called them permables. If you've
Oh,
ever
yeah.
heard talk in the last
Yeah,
5
it's
years.
rare to hear Brian, and I've met him many a times. I used to go to
Yeah.
the First Trust conferences, and Brian pretty much he's pretty damn right. Most
And I gotta
cases.
tell you, and it's interesting. I heard Bob Stein talk in person yesterday. I heard Brian on a couple of podcasts. I'm sorry, a podcast and a couple of interviews. And it's interesting. Not all, because they brought up a few other things, but the majority of the core reasons that they both have as their conviction is stuff you and I have been talking about for over 12 months.
Yeah, we were just early.
Oh, we'll see what happens. I think we got to go down before we got to go up. I still think we'll have a good year, but
Yeah. And I mean, if what I think is going to happen with the Fed is they're going to hang interest rates out there for a lot longer because they feel like we're going to see all kinds of inflation and things like that. So, I mean, that just puts more stress on companies and everything else. So, yeah, we might see less regulation
yeah. And I
with the
got to tell you,
new.
I know I bitched about it before. I don't go out a lot. I like to go out as, all right, get the hell out of the house, whatever. I just a basic breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm not even talking about anything extravagant. It's 20, 30% higher minimum.
At the
I don't live
least.
high off the hog, especially when I go out. I like a nice dinner every now and then, but I just cannot believe the
Well,
cost
and
and all the restaurants are full, my man.
oh, I know. That's the scary part. Before, Crystal and I just never really even thought about it, but it's just all of a sudden, okay, we'll go out for breakfast. We don't go to fancy places for breakfast and stuff like that. And you look and you're like, Jesus, I just spent $50, some eggs and bacon at this point. We've got to see some kind of relief. Hopefully with increased oil production, stuff like that, and getting the prices down, hopefully that'll go through the system. But the problem is that it ain't going to happen just like overnight. It's going to
No,
take some
we're
time.
gonna have some fun doing podcasts this year, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, I think
Starts in
so.
a few weeks, I think.
So coming up next week on the what's coming out, we've got core PPI. We've also got CPI coming out next week. So this will be the first read of the new year. We're going to have retail sales coming out, which that'll encompass all of the December, the end of the holidays and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be interesting because that if we see those spike up or anything like that, I think we may see the market pull back a little bit because basically looking at the Fed may not drop rates until later in the year.
Yeah.
Which I think personally, that's my thought process is we won't see much activity from them until maybe midsummer or later. They're in wait and see mode unless something blows up at that
Yeah.
point.
So to answer your question, because I took a right turn, I came back.
Yeah.
I'm going to say the same thing. At least 2, possibly 3 this year.
Yep.
And if there's more, then yes, you and I were 12 to 18 months late.
Yep.
Because if
Absolutely.
there's 4 or more, then
There's some issues.
cracks widened.
Yeah, there's some issues, but the interest rates are staying persistently up there. In fact, they've been slowly rising. I think the 10-year was 4.46 yesterday, and it had been as low as like 3.95 just a few months ago. Those are things that start to spill out into mortgages and the real estate market and everything else.
We'll have to see. Mortgage rates are now 7.1 and change.
Okay. Now,
Uh,
7. Yeah.
that's got to go through the system somehow. You thought
Yeah.
interest rates coming down, mortgage rates would come down. I think that's now based on the 10-year, which now is about to breach 4.7.
Which is it always is based on the 10-year. And that's what people think. Oh, the Fed's lowering rates. They're only lowering short term rates. They don't control the long term or the midterm rates. which is really what most things are based off of. I think we're in for a little bit of headwinds going into this year. We're seeing some rotation in the stock market, although we're seeing a resurgence of the Nifty 5 or 7 or whatever you call them. We're starting to see a little bit of movement in the rest of the market, but I think until we see hopefully some I hope the consumer isn't stretched so far that they can't they continue to spend is the way I would look at it.
That's a conversation for another time because
Yeah.
we know that most of it's going on credit card debt. Carry over about $1.2 trillion. I
Yep.
don't know how that could and quick story, quick thing. So my father, who's about to turn 84,
Mm.
got a thing in the mail. My parents shop at Kohl's every now and then, the retail store. So he got a credit card application.
Yeah.
They wanted a Kohl's credit card
Yeah.
at 30.75%.
Jeez. Uh, it's just they're the literally loan shark rates.
But I understand it, but department cards, credit cards went out when,
Yeah.
everybody had a Visa or MasterCard for years. But if you wanted to finance your clothing purchase at Kohl's,
30%.
30.75%.
But you get 10% off every time you buy there. That's
Great.
insane.
We'll make up for that discount after when we carry it over for 2 months.
That's exactly correct. It's unreal. I think an interesting year to say the least. You and I will have plenty to talk about this year. It is not going to be a year to just sit back and not really pay attention to it. So, folks, make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any of this stuff. And we're going to continue to do good stuff like this. Typically, we do 1 to 2 shows per week. So, you got to make sure you're subscribed so you see them when they come up. So, thanks a lot. And we will see you when you get or we'll see you the next time.